Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for this important opportunity. The title of the paper that I introduced today is The Storm of Creative Destruction, Understanding the Damage Remedy Logic of Capitalism in Times of Pandemics. And this is the result of research with Professor Roberta Iannone. In this paper, we try to investigate what role capitalism in its hierarchical logic plays in times of pandemic crisis. When the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, better known as COVID-19, became a real crisis, it was also because of its holistic and pervasive extension far beyond the sphere of health. The increasingly close interdependence between the different dimensions of experience very quickly made the health crisis also an economic, social, and environmental crisis. Within this framework, capitalism in its neoliberal version as the dominant economic system at the planetary level also played its role. Often, however, this role has been interpreted in a one-sided manner and loaded with value judgments as if there were a capitalism that creates pandemics and therefore to be condemned, or a capitalism that saves us from pandemics and therefore to be absolved. Both readings seems to be more ideological than scientific, or at any rate do not always render the complexity of the actual logic of capitalism, which is much more multiform than a one-dimensional interpretation would suggest. So the research hypothesis underlying this paper consists in an idea of capitalism that is the creative destruction has the most typical and constitutive logic of the phenomenon since its origins, which also appears most promising for scientifically explaining the relationship between capitalism and pandemics. To develop this hypothesis by juxtaposing the most iconic bibliography on the topic, an attempt will be made to understand the extent to which a view of capitalism as source is also accompanied by a view of capitalism as a remedy for the pandemic crisis. So in this way, we will try to demonstrate the scientific inconsistency of a reading that dogmatically contrasts antithetical understandings of capitalism as if they were opposing processes of good and bad, of true or false. There are several studies highlighting the link between capitalism and pandemics in a cause and effect relationship. Capitalism as the promoter or accelerator of the COVID-19 pandemic. In other words, it is asserted, albeit with due differences, that capitalism produces pandemics to all intents and purposes. This is, for example, the case when linking zoonosis, for example, the transmission of an infection disease of animal origin to humans, to factors such as increased human demand for animal protein, intensification of unsustainable agriculture, urbanization, climate change, human encroachment into natural habitats, changes in land use, and extractive industries, irrational use of antivirals, antibiotics, and other hormonal drugs, and so on. Similarly, several scientific studies hypothesized the link between viral epidemics and environmental conditions, and specifically evident correlations between prolonged exposure to high levels of air pollution and high COVID-19 lethality rates. We can think, for example, of studies on the relationship between capitalism and the environmental impact it causes, particularly in terms of health repercussions. So according to this analysis, the link between pandemics and the difficult environmental situation generated by capitalist practices is becoming increasingly clear to the extent that it is possible to speak of a corona capitalism, indicating the relationship between pandemics and the capitalist dimensions. Beyond the directions that capitalism can take, the criticalities that this economic system brings can also be found, according to some studies, within capitalism itself. The sick root would be the desire for the accumulation of value at the basis of a series of contradictions that are evident when moments of fracture arise, for example, at the social level. This was the case with the COVID-19 pandemic, which highlighted many of these contradictions. Moreover, the pandemic situation should not be understood as the consequence of a natural process, but rather as the outcome of a social production. Alongside its natural root, recognizing the social root of pandemics is here the pivotal element in affirming the possibility of a critique of the capitalist economic system and the current social system. So a far cry from the idea of the virus as a black swan, exogenous and unpredictable. On the opposite side of what has been highlighted so far are the positions of those who recognize a proactive role for capitalism in relation to pandemics. So according to this line of thought, although globalization caused the pandemic to spread rapidly, it was neoliberal capitalism that ensured that soon after the crisis began, countermeasures were already in place to address and overcome it, from protective masks to tests and swabs to vaccines and so on, just to name a few of these solutions provided by companies and provided by capitalism to the pandemic crisis. But capitalism has also enabled the use of the digital services that have made it possible to continue work and schooling from home through companies such as, for example, Microsoft, Zoom, and Cisco, and the industrial chains that have allowed us everything we need, not only to live, to survive, if we think of groceries, for example, but also to maintain a lifestyle that includes the dimension of leisure. So everything was done according to the logic clearly of the market and profit. These examples clearly show that in dealing with pandemics, capitalism can be both a source and a remedy. As is well known, the topic of creative destruction has the constitutive logic of capitalism, has its roots in the thought of Werner Sombart, later finding wide dissemination through the thinking of Schumpeter. In the word capitalism, socialism, and democracy, Schumpeter defines it as the essential fact of capitalism and refers it in particular to new consumer goods, new methods of production, new markets, and new forms of organization. So we probably can say that creative destruction today is merely embodied in the tendency to give rise to profit innovations that create damage, for which new profit solutions are created, which create more damage, and so on. So, just to give some conclusions, as we have tried to show, the image of capitalism in its relation to pandemics is for the most part polarized by two opposing camps. So, which one then is the correct image? The underlying assumption behind these reflections, as simple as it is powerful in its implications, is that capitalism is extremely variable. It has always been so in its models or in its relations with the state and the economy in general. Like these, many other differences are easily discernible from a diachronic analysis of capitalism through the centuries. What remains, however, and what probably constitutes the heart of this very variability is precisely the dynamic of creative destruction. 𝐭𝐿𝐴 writes that every civilization has the capitalism it deserves, in the sense that it all depends on the direction one wants its course to be. Innovation does not only have a rate of progression, but also a direction. Our challenge is to set the new course to be followed. So the alternative does not seem to be that between capitalism yes or capitalism not, or at least this does not seem to be the direction in which we are going at the planetary level, but between a capitalism that knows how to innovate and create or find solutions and remedies much more and better that it inevitably contributes to destroying. So the COVID-19 crisis offers us the opportunity to direct innovation and to direct a new kind of innovation. So thank you very much for your attention, and for any question or comments, we are available at these email addresses. So thank you very much.